Good morning, friends, and welcome to the new episode of Quest for Excellence series hosted by Intellectus Consulting. As I had mentioned to you in the inaugural episode, the Quest for Excellence series is dedicated towards improving the standards of marketing excellence in our pharmaceutical industry. In this endeavor, you will get to meet and hear perspectives from business leaders of our industry and learn as to what it takes to be the best in the pharmaceutical industry in terms of either leadership excellence or marketing excellence or strategy excellence, commercial excellence, and brand building excellence. In today's episode, I'm very happy to be hosting one of the senior and most respected business leaders of our industry. Please meet Mr. Anuj Reddy, who is the Vice President for Commercial Excellence for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories based in Hyderabad. Anuj has had a very successful and long tenure in our industry for the past 26 to 27 years. He has had multifaceted experience and exposure to several important functions like business development, business planning, product management, commercial excellence, and also leadership roles which involve P&L responsibility. It is a matter of great pride to host Anuj, whom I have personally known as a professional and as an industry colleague for over 20 years now. Anuj has had not only domestic marketing experience, but also international marketing experience when he started off his career with Novo Nordisk, which is the world's leader in diabetes, way back in the late 90s and early 2000s. He has had a phenomenal track record of launching some of the most successful original innovator brands in our industry, such as Mixtard, Novo, Levemir, Novomix 30, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let me now welcome Anuj Reddy to this season episode. Hi,
Hey,
Anuj.
how are you? Yeah,
I'm very fine. Good to see you. And you look so trim and so smart. Good to see you.
same here, man. Shailesh, it's been a while.
I started. Yes, it's so great to see you, Anuj. In fact, I started the call 2 minutes earlier, and I did a recording of giving your, introduction to the group.
Okay, perfect.
So I will also share that with you as well. Yeah, so great to have you, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this initiative. And as I was telling our viewers who go see this interview with you, is that I've been very fortunate to have known you as one of those few industry leaders who has had a multifaceted and a multidimensional exposure to the different business functions of our industry, right? Starting with product management, business development, business planning, strategy, and now commercial excellence. What's even more impressive is the fact that you have had not only the domestic pharmaceutical marketing experience, but also the international marketing experience, right? Having worked with the global leader in diabetes like Novo Nordisk in Copenhagen for more than 5 years, and doing outstanding work in supporting various global markets like Japan, US, etc. And we will get to that in a minute. So, Anuj, welcome to this series, because as you know, Intellect Consulting, our company, and you've been closely associated with us, is passionately committed towards driving marketing and management and commercial excellence in the industry in all forms and facets, be it through webinars, blogs, industry-sponsored forums, as well as workshops and personalized coaching interventions. So the Quest for Excellence series, as I outlined to you, is another step in that direction, which is going to capture your perspectives. And we would love to hear from you, and so also all other industry colleagues, at what it takes to be really the best in any of the domains. So without much ado, Anuj, thank you so much. Once again, a personal thank you from me and from my organization for having agreed to be a part of this initiative.
No, absolutely. I think lovely interacting with you, Shailesh, and it's always a pleasure. We've known each other for over I think about 25 years now. So always a pleasure speaking with you.
25 years, yes. Thank you so much, Anuj. Thank you. I want to straight dive into our interaction, and I'm very excited to hear your thoughts around certain things. See, you have spent so much of time across these various functions, and as I just mentioned. So I first want to understand, and probably our viewers also, what prompted you to get into these lateral roles, right? Because generally we see in our industry, product managers get into vertical growth, and they either go for product manager, group product manager kind of vertical growth, or they stay in the same therapy area and change companies. But you have been completely different from the pack. So I just want to hear your thoughts on what prompted you to take this lateral roles, and how do you think it helped you shape your career now when you look back in this last 20 years?
So, Shailesh, I mean, to be honest, I think, it's God's been kind. A lot of times these things have been thrown at me and I've accepted them. But honestly, having gone through that, when I look back, I honestly believe that experiences rather than experience is important, right? So if you've got multiple kinds of experiences, you're a lot sharper. You understand things from different perspectives, right?
Yeah, honestly, sorry, we lost you.
Could you hear me? Can you still
No, I
hear
couldn't.
me?
I lost you. Actually, your connection is unstable, Adam.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah.
Perfectly. Let me just try to see if I can change to another connection if this is unstable. Just give me a minute.
Yeah.
No, I think this is the most stable connection I've got. Great. No, so I was saying, Shailesh, I think, these are things that honestly I did not plan. Yes, I think I was open to them. I did not plan them. When I look back, I can clearly say that, experiences rather than experience is very, very important. When you've got a multitude of experiences, when you've spent time with different kinds of areas, I think you're a lot sharper and know the industry far, far, far better. So that would be my suggestion, that there's one way of growing, that's of course the lateral way of growing. But having done that, not done that, having have had varied lateral roles, I can definitely recommend that to each one. Please don't look at your careers only as something that you start with, let's say a brand manager, then move up to a GPM, then move up to an MM. It doesn't work that way. And I think people require, folks who understand business, not just from a marketing perspective, from a sales perspective, from a BD perspective, potentially from a sales force effectiveness perspective. So I think having opportunities of working in different functions is a great opportunity. So I would suggest that if you get these opportunities, take them with both hands. A lot of times you're not, given these opportunities. Seek them if you can. That would be my suggestion.
Right. So what you are essentially telling is, they may probably not exist, but you go and seek them out, so that in terms of your lateral development and exposure and well-rounded learnings over the period. So Anuj, what's been your key learnings when you dabbled in BD in business planning? How do you think you applied that to commercial leadership roles when you got into it at some point of time? Any key takeaways or learnings for a lot?
So major takeaways. So I've done business roles, I've done marketing roles, and I've also done, business development, business planning roles. So I had the fortune of managing clinical development and regulatory as well in the past. Right. So often, when I've been managing my businesses, I need to interact with all of these guys, right? And a lot of times, having done these roles earlier, it gives you a vantage point to know as to what can get done. What, for example, if a medic kind of comes around and say, this is going to take me about 2 years to complete, the study is going to take me 2 years to complete. I think very simple questions, having done that before. Uh, you know, what kind of a design are you operating with? How many patients do we need in order to do it, to get a statistical significance? Is it a double blind? Is it an open label? What are your sites that you're operating with? Are there things that you can run in parallel? These are questions that you can definitely ask and make sure that these timelines can be crunched, or you're giving some kind of input into them in order to make sure that your product can be out there in the market quicker. A similar thing with regulatory, right? I mean, if you've done this role before, you understand a little bit of regulatory, you can't be taken for a ride. So I think understanding as to what are, and you're never going to become an expert. That's not the intent. If you're a marketeer, don't intend to become an expert in regulatory. That's not what I'm suggesting. Don't intend to become an expert in clinical development or any other function. But knowing what it takes gives you the edge over everyone else.
Right. So would it be fair to say, Anuj, that when you handle these kind of lateral roles, which are also very important for successful outcome, you develop a sense of cross-functional leadership early on, which helps you to seek better roles? Would that be one message? Would that be right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think most people who are marketeers obviously take that up as a stepping stone to probably get into as business leaders at some point in time. And honestly, to be a business leader, you have to be a great marketer, because obviously that's a very important aspect of business. But there are things beyond marketing that are part of business. Understanding sales is just as important. Just understanding what does it take to succeed in business requires you to be a great business development guy, needs you to understand medicine fairly well, needs you to understand clinical development fairly well, needs you to understand regulatory fairly well. So I think
Absolutely.
having this cross-functional overview helps you immensely in becoming a strong business leader.
Great. That's very, very nice to hear that. Would you also say, Anuj, that getting into the depth of those core functional processes, at least from each of these domains, is also important besides the marketing function, which you obviously.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think just as we consider ourselves experts in marketing, we understand all aspects of marketing. There are people who are doing these roles in other parts of the organization. I'm not suggesting that we double guess them, but I think supporting them with our points of view, suggesting ways out, because typically when you're in a box, it's impossible to think outside the box. And for a medical guy, you're outside the box.
Right.
So the suggestions that you can give are very different from the ones that he would get. The same is true for BD, the same is true for regulatory, the same is true for sales. So
Right.
I think it's you being in marketing and not being in the core functions that they operate in gives you a huge vantage point. Make use of that vantage point. You can only have that vantage point if you know something about their business.
Right, right. No, this is very helpful, Anuj. Thank you so much for those lead, learnings. One is obviously to seek out for those roles and not just, wait and see if it's given to you. Second, develop a in-depth understanding of the processes of those support functions and think out of the box. And third, very important is to develop, a good sense of cross-functional leadership. So thanks for that. Okay, let me now turn the clock back and let's see, about 20, 25 years ago, when we first met up, obviously, way back in 96, 97. You had come in fresh from the sales role as a marketing executive in Chennai into the product management function. And, you had a very successful initial 3 years in the domestic marketing function of Novo Nordisk before you took on an international assignment with the headquarters in Copenhagen. So I would like me and our viewers would love to listen your perspectives on how the stint in both the domestic and the international or global marketing, as I would call it, helped you get a full 360-degree view of the marketing function. And also, if you could help us understand the key similarities and differences in these two, functions of global versus the local kind of
Yeah.
market?
No, so thank you, Shailesh. I think a very important question, and I was just pondering over it, as I was thinking about our conversation. And one of the things that struck me is, when you're looking at global rules, a lot of it is because you're working for different geographies. It's not just one geography that you're working with. So obviously, the focus would be on the top 10 that contribute about 80% of your total business. So the US obviously being one of them, parts of Europe being another, Japan being a third. So having a view of cultural similarities, differences, treatment paradigms across countries become very, very important in the global sense. So so that's a huge difference. You're not looking at one market, you're looking at multiple markets. I think working with cross-functional stakeholders, cross-cultural stakeholders, so to say, is
Right.
very, very important, right? Um, Also, I think you're working with a lot of folks in R&D, right?
Right. Right.
Because a lot of things that happen in global marketing is before the product is out in the market. So if you were to look at a lot of a lot of these MNCs are the way they are almost let's say they work on the PNC model. So essentially, they've got teams that manage early projects. They've got teams that manage launch projects. There are teams that manage lifecycle management projects,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So so when you're looking at an early project team, these guys are giving a huge amount of input into the R&D teams. So they're working with things like target product profile. What should the product look like when it hits the market? What kind of trials should we be doing in order to make sure that the product is successful out there in the market? They work a lot on thought leadership, which is, how do we make sure that before we launch the product, huge number of doctors already know about it, thought leaders already know about the product. So these are another set of things that they typically work on. The pricing is a very important aspect of global marketing, right? So what kind of pricing should we have so that it's not too high and at the same time is not too low? Because pricing is, today there's reference pricing across, right? There's some markets like the US where there's no reference pricing. But nevertheless, I think most countries have become reference price now. So figuring out what should we price it at, and what should the launch plan be? Should we first launch in this country and then move it on? That becomes a very important aspect of global marketing. So that's typically the kind of roles that a global marketer plays, right?
Okay.
Which
Okay.
is more cross-cultural, cross-functional, understanding different cultures, working with R&D, working with clinical development, working with life cycle management. Even before you've started launching your first product, you're also already thinking about what are the things that you should be doing in terms of life cycle management. How do you expand the indication? What are the new formulations that you can have, et cetera, right? So these are huge. These are the things that a global marketer would do. Now look at what an Indian marketer would do. I would almost say that this is exactly what an Indian marketer should also be doing, right? It should be no different. And if
Right.
you're able to combine these two, I do believe that when you're doing marketing within India or any other affiliate, it's a lot more on the ground. So you're trying to do what the global marketer has done, but from a country perspective, right?
Right.
So I think it's a lot more in depth where you're trying to figure out what will work in this culture, what will not work in this culture. How do I communicate? How don't I communicate? So things are not very different, except they're on a smaller scale. That's but I think one thing that I've learned from global marketers is the lifecycle management part of it, right? Which I
Right.
think we need to do a lot better
Lot better.
in the local markets.
Right.
I think once let's say you're launching a product, pre-marketing of a product. Very few of our companies in India do. I mean, of course, the MNCs do it. So how early can you start? Should you start that 24 months in advance? Should you start that 12 months in advance? What are the things that you need to be doing in order to make sure that you're creating a level of, um, you know, um, um, uh, understanding about the product, Those are kind of things that I think Indian marketers can definitely learn from global marketers.
Yes, yes. No, that's really insightful, Anuj, because I have also sensed, after being an entrepreneur and actively engaged in the coaching of brand management teams across my clients, that one of the areas of certain development definitely is what you mentioned is raising the standards of pre-marketing, doing the great work around building the market, product acceptance in the market, and also doing the life cycle management piece. Uh, Very often, Anuj, I see, and I don't know how you would want to respond to that, that marketing excellence, as you rightly said, in the Indian context, needs to dovetail with the life cycle management, pricing, and other key aspects of the process. I find it is sometimes wanting a lot. I mean, it's not great. Why do you think that's the case, and why do you think it's happening? I mean, just a few thoughts. If you think is we have found wanting or lacking. Now, we don't put too much rigor into it. In terms of pricing strategy, in terms of building them up. What could be the reason? Is because of any particular reason? What would you want to?
So, Shailesh, I mean, it's a great question, and I think look at the different kinds of companies that operate within India, right? I mean, you've got the MNCs where pricing to a large extent could be global. In some cases, we of course do local Indian pricing, and there of course you do a lot of these price elasticity understanding and all of that. But it's far and few in between. I mean, most
Right.
of it is decided globally, saying this is the bare minimum price that we will allow you to accept. And then, let's go to the Indian companies. Indian companies typically are operating where it's almost a genericized market. You may be first to market, but often it's defined by what my next competitor is going to launch at. So you always double guessing your next competitor as to, if I price it at this, what's the guy going to price it at? What's my next move going to be? And therefore your costs, your pricing is more or less decided by your costs. I don't know if that's a great idea, but that's typically the way it works. So you've got one group that's getting dictated by corporate, and then you've got another group that's dictated by the market.
Right.
Uh, there's of course a small segment where you are a quasi innovator, where you've got a differentiated product which is hard to copy. And in those cases, I do believe that companies are undertaking the pricing researches, trying to figure out what's the price at which we make it available in the market. So I would say that we need to do a lot more there, but the way the market is structured is also not allowing us to do it with the same level of rigor as we would have or we should have.
All right. So essentially, what you say, and if I understand you correctly, is you have the MNCs which are obviously bound by the global pricing, the flow pricing kind of issues with their parent company in the headquarters, and you have the Indian companies which are split between either doing pricing research through rigorous mechanisms or looking at the top three pricing brands priced, and then they would probably go for the best possible weighted average price or cost plus pricing, as you rightly said, and that's probably existent in our market today. All
Yeah.
right. Thanks, Anuj. Um, and the next question, Anuj, is you've spent a rich 2.5 decades in marketing and in commercial operations. Um, how have you seen the evolution of marketing as a function in our pharmaceutical industry? I'm very keen to know because you are a passionate marketer yourself.
Yeah.
The good or the bad, whatever it is, I would love to hear your thoughts around this.
No, so I'm just rewinding to when I used to be a product manager, and I think and Shailesh, you and I were working on similar products or same products in some cases, right? And I remember I think the marketing was a lot about brand building at that point in
Yes.
time, right? Um, and brands were the kings, and another, let's say a decade later, the situation changed a little. I'm not saying changed completely. Brand building has never gone out of vogue. So it's always been in vogue, will continue to be in vogue. But I think there was a tilt or a shift towards customer. So the whole market started pivoting on the customer, right? So you saw, um, you know, customer centricity as the core. Branding was important, but there was a new element that was added, which was customer centricity. So And you started looking at, what can I do for the customer? If there's a CP, then how many teams can meet the same CP? Because the consulting physician, of course, treats both cardiovascular, he treats diabetes, he treats neurology, he treats pain, he treats respiratory. So can I get a core group of customers who then start ensuring my productivity increases? So it became a lot about customers and productivity, the discussion. And brand building started taking a little bit of a backseat, right?
Okay.
Now, when I'm looking at it, things have changed again, right? Of course, the customer is just as important. He's not gone out of vogue. And I don't think the brand is ever going to go out of vogue, right? So I think the new paradigm, as I'm seeing it, is, where you're marketing to the customer. So I think personalized marketing is something that will become more and more important. Now, we've tried doing it. Look at our communication, the way it's evolved, right? We used to probably have one standard communication that used to go across all customer sets. Then we started differentiating it, basically saying to a GP, I have a different form of communication; to a CP, a different form of communication; to the specialist, a different form of communication, right? Now it's getting to, almost personalizing at the level of, what's his belief system? Is he a believer in my brand, or is he a non-believer in my brand? Right? So does he like my molecule, or does he not like my molecule? Where does he use my molecule? So even if I was to use a typical quadrant, which is, belief in my product versus belief in my molecule, um, right? So is this guy on the top right quadrant, which means he's high, he likes my molecule and he likes my brand. He's my core customer. How do I interact with that customer? There's another customer who likes my brand but doesn't really like my molecule. What do I do with him? Do I communicate differently with him? So that's the paradigm at which we are currently. I think this is also going to move even further, right? Where we try to get into personas, and that's possible through the digital work that, today it's probably not possible for my rep to speak a different language based on the customer. So let's say there's one customer that who likes my brand but doesn't like the molecule that I operate with. Should I communicate differently with him? Maybe it's not. It becomes a little difficult because of the kind of physical marketing that we do. But now that we've got digital marketing, that's becoming possible to do, right? So marketing is going to become a lot more personalized moving forward. We are already seeing green shoots of it, right? But I believe that personalized marketing is going to become the order of the day. So
Sure.
the paradigm shift from brand marketing moved into customer marketing, or pivoting to the consumer, a customer in the middle. And now I think it's going to move towards personalized marketing, which is trying to understand who your customer is and trying to make sure that you're trying to make a difference at an n equal to 1 level.
N equal to 1. Yes, I was about to ask that. Right. No, it's very, very nicely put, Anuj. Thank you so much for that. In fact, you've already answered the next part of the question, but I think you've hit the nail in terms of the personalized marketing of N equal to 1. I just want to, ask you a question on the Dr. Reddy's ways of building brands. I mean, DRL, as we know, is one of the strongest brand building companies and organizations. It has been around for several decades now, and powerful positions in various therapy areas that you've had in pain management, gastroenterology, oncology, immunology, not only the biologic super specialty, but also in other segments, pediatrics, as you used to head up before. If you could briefly share with us as an audience, what's the DRL way of building brands, and how is it so immensely successful? I mean, and what is the learnings that brand marketers need to have, in terms of getting into the real process of building brands from your experience with Dr. Reddy's as being one of the great brand building organizations that you are?
So, Shailesh, I will not make this about Dr. Reddy's alone. I think
Correct.
I'll talk about it in
Sure.
general about marketing and marketers as to
Sure.
how they should look at
Please.
it. I think marketeers have a huge responsibility today. And believe me, in my point of view, marketeers are probably one of the most powerful guys within the organization because they can build brands and they can destroy brands, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
often this is an area that we don't pay as much attention to. And I think we need to be paying a lot more attention to marketing as a function and marketeers as a group of people.
Yes.
Now, let me just talk about what I have noticed with marketeers typically. And a marketeer typically, when he comes into a fresh organization, he carries with him the legacy of his past organization as to what has worked with me in my past organization, right? And obviously, the reason he got his current job is because he's done well in his past. So no doubt about that. And unfortunately, a lot of times what I have seen is what has worked for him in the past, he tries to redo that in his current job as well. And
Hmm.
that to me
Okay.
is a prescription for disaster. I think every brand, depending on where it is in its life cycle, needs to be treated very differently. Obviously, when a brand is being introduced, there's a different element that a doctor, a marketer needs to work on when a product is to be launched, right? A pre-launch brand manager is a very different brand manager. His understanding of science needs to be phenomenal. His KOL management skills needs to be phenomenal. He needs to be in a position to interact with, both his clinical team, his regulatory team, his KOL managers, his KOL team, in order to figure out as to how does he manage that life cycle of the brand. And obviously he needs to treat that brand very differently from a brand that he's been, if he's launched, if he's been, interacting with a brand that has already been in the market for 10 years, obviously that needs to be treated very differently, right? So pre-marketing is something. If he's marketing a product that is 2 years away from launch, he'll look at it completely from a pre-marketing lens. Let's say there is a launch that is coming up. Obviously, I think the focus is a lot more on, what is the competition like. Pricing becomes very, very important. My go-to market becomes very important. Um, how am I positioning the product becomes very important. So these are the kind of things, and what kind of activities, what kind of initiatives would I take up in my first 6 months of launch in order to make sure that I have a rapid uptake becomes very important. Gone are those days, in my view, where your life cycle was very long. To me, a brand can be built in the first 6 months of its launch. If you've lost the first 6 months, you've lost the brand for good. So I think making sure that you're able to pack everything in your first 6 months becomes very important, because
Right.
there is a power of momentum that a marketer needs to master.
Yes.
If your launch happens with a certain momentum, the field force sees it, the doctors see it, the organization sees it. And if these three people who are very, very important see it as something that has got traction, you will see more investment coming in from the organization. You will see a lot more attention coming in through the doctor, and also you will see a lot more attention from the sales force. So
Right.
the first 6 months of any launch becomes super critical.
So
The third part of it, if you're managing a brand that is in the latter part of the life cycle, I think becomes very, very critical as to how you're managing the life cycle of these brands, right? Are there are you looking at multi-year launch plan? Are you looking at multi-year growth plans for these brands, right? So, what are the next indications that I need to be looking at? How do I increase diagnosis? How do I increase the funnel of this particular disease? How do I ensure that people start wanting to prescribe my brand vis-a-vis some other brand? So I think life cycle management becomes very important. So I think from a marketer's perspective, understanding where your brand is in the life cycle of the product of the brand, and then figuring out what is most essential in each of these life cycle is the most important thing.
Great. I mean, uh, it's amazing when you say that the brand manager, if he's been hired from another organization, tries to replicate what he did in his previous organization in the new environment without even realizing at what stage of the life cycle is, and then that is setting himself up for failure rather than success, as you said. So I think one of your messages that I'm hearing loud and clear for the brand managers and marketers in our community is unlearn the past, because there is no guarantee that it is going to work in the future, and obviously what worked yesterday doesn't work today, right? And that's really helpful. um, when you've spoken so much about brand building processes, I obviously there are those fundamental processes of insights and positioning, as you mentioned, segmentation, etc. These are extremely important pivots in brand building. But yet, Anuj, we see that enough rigor at times may not get applied for whatever the reason, either because of lack of understanding of brand managers or because it simply doesn't have the time. So how does one overcome this challenge? I mean, I know there is no prescriptive formula, but how does one overcome this? Because maybe he doesn't have those learnings, or what would you advise the marketing community? How do they then bring up to speed on that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just thoughts, any thoughts?
No, so I think a very important point, Shailesh. I think especially when you're building your careers, I think as marketers, very important to find the right kind of mentors, the right kind of people to work with.
Okay.
I think you can't stress that enough. Um, when you start your careers, I think you need to invest in working for the right kind of mentor or the right kind of a boss.
Right.
People who understand marketing are super critical. A lot of times in the industry, we get bosses who've been sales heads earlier, and there's nothing wrong with it. I have seen some brilliant sales heads who've become brilliant business heads. But they also need to understand the marketing aspect of it,
Correct.
right? So my suggestion would be work with people who understand this process, because otherwise, if you don't work with people who understand these processes, you won't grow as a marketeer. So figuring out what your current job is. So invest in, as I mentioned, money is not as important in the initial part of your careers. I think the first 10 years doesn't really matter, honestly. I think I've seen too many brand managers focusing on money, moving jobs, trying to figure out, what should I be doing next? How do I get a higher paycheck? I think that's not important in the first, 7 to 10 years of your lives. I think the
Right.
most important thing is to work with people who can teach you marketing.
Right.
Uh, Work for companies who can teach you marketing. That becomes super critical for me.
Brilliantly said, Anuj. Thanks a lot, because that take home learning for our audience is don't be designation or paycheck centric, at least in the initial 7 to 10 years of your career. Work with people as mentors who understand and who would groom you and ingrain you with the fundamental concepts. I think because that is what is going to stand for you in the later part. Excellent, Anuj. Anuj, let me now get into the next part of our conversation is, given what you have seen, the tremendous evolution of the marketing function from what it was earlier, brand building, to what you said is customer centricity, the N equal to one, which is very true. And we see that in our engagements with clients. Um, what is your take on the position that what are the new skill sets that pharma marketeers need to develop or learn, in order to sail through in the new environment, because it is rapidly changing. There is so much of complexity, uncertainty. So what is your take on the new skill sets or new domains that brand managers now need to learn, and maybe even if you feel unlearn, you could your message would be very, very helpful. Yeah.
Sure. I think there was a time where you had rampant numbers product launches, right? And your launch programs, your launch plans used to be made in 2 days, 3 days. Those days are gone. I mean, those subscale brand launches are not some things. I believe are things of the past right now, right? So I think we will need to be a lot more focused on making brands bigger, because I think that's what COVID has shown us is big brands are becoming bigger. And small brands are almost disappearing. So I think prioritization, figuring out which are the brands that you need to be focusing on, is something that every organization is going to do. Which means that these 2-day, 3-day brand launches are a thing of the past. So working on these multi-year launch plans are some things that each one will need to be proficient on. So don't look at it as a brand plan for a year. You will need to look at brand plans which are 5 years, 6 years ahead as well, which would need to involve lifecycle management, which would need to involve things like, am I increasing, am I changing the indication? What's my new go-to-market model? Am I going through new channels? So those are things that you definitely need to do, which are traditional marketing, but we haven't done that enough. So we will absolutely need to do that even more now. So that's the first part, traditional marketing, which we will definitely need to get better at. So that's number one. The second, I believe, that COVID has shown us is digital has become the order of the day. Sales has become digital. So our sales guys are talking to doctors digitally. Marketeers are talking to doctors digitally. But I'm saying not just digital marketing. Now you will need to start looking at omni-channel marketing. So omni-channel marketing is about your physical, your digital. That could be emails, that could be SMSs, any other form. That could be telephones. Um, that could be a pull mechanism as well, wherein doctor lands up in one of your sites seeking more information, and then you interact with him on the site. So all of this will need to be coordinated. So you can't be speaking differently to him in a physical meeting, speaking to him differently in a digital platform, and speaking to him differently when he comes to a pull platform. So they will need to be coordinated. So I think that understanding of omni-channel marketing becomes very, very critical. So if my rep meets him on one particular day, when should my digital message be sent to him? What's the frequency with which I need to send it to him? What's the gap between physical and digital? What is the content, so that I can move him along the IDA scale? All of those things you will need to start thinking of, right? So that's one critical part of omni-channel marketing that I think people will now need to start figuring out.
Okay.
Analytics is another area that we will definitely need to spend a lot more time on. And here I'm not talking about Excel skills. I think for analytics for us in the past has been about, and me included, has been about knowing Excel well and trying to figure out how to make Excel sheets. No, I'm not talking about that. I think a lot of data is being churned out today. And that data can be used very, very efficiently. So you've got clearly people who are currently working with AI and ML models. And believe me, this is no fad. This is no fad. This is going to get used in omni-channel marketing. This is going to get used in sales management. This is going to get used in HR practices as well. So this is an area that every marketer will need to pick up as quickly as he can. And also elements of personalized marketing. I think these are three areas that I see very different from the traditional marketing that marketers have been used to.
Right, right. No, this is extremely beneficial take homes, Anuj. Thank you for that, because I think what you have said is very pertinent. One is to obviously strengthen your traditional marketing fundamentals or basics, as you have been saying, right? Your strategy, your positioning, your understanding the customer. Second is practicing and learning omni-channel marketing by having customer connects, but similarity of the connect across different channels of communication because the customer is the same. Third is using data analytics for decision driven outcomes, so that whether it's sales management or HR processes, you will have to now, there is no more shying away from it, because this is the new future. And I think that is very, very important. So given this kind of a background, Anuj, I probably am coming to the last part of my interaction with you is, where do you see our industry in another 3 to 5 years from now? I mean, there's a lot of talk of digitalization, digital transformation. COVID has forced us to become digitally. We were never ready for it. I mean, if you look at it, just about 15, 16 months ago, last March, everything came to a standstill abrupt and we were scratching around. But yes, we try to make do of it. Now we have been the second wave, we're coming into the unlock phase. How has been your experience, and what did you think, is the industry going to go through? Is it now here digital is for good? Is you going to see it happen in a bigger way? What's your take on it?
No, I think absolutely it's here to stay, and that's I have no two thoughts about that. Honestly, if you ask me, I mean, I've been a rep myself, and if you look at a day in a life of a rep, he spends close to about 10 to 12 hours of his time out there in the field. Of that, believe me, doing his specific job, which is in the doctor's clinic, I think he must be spending about 30 to 40 minutes of his time there. Right? The rest of it, he spends either waiting or traveling or potentially planning. Right?
Yes.
So those are the three things that he would do for 95% of the time. 5% of the time, he's actually doing what he needs to be doing, which is speaking to the doctors. So I don't mean any disrespect, but the fact is, this is a very unproductive way of managing resources. Very unproductive way of managing resources.
Right.
Now we have an opportunity of ensuring that that productivity can be improved, right?
Yes.
Digital allows us that opportunity. And I think we as marketeers and as salespeople need to embrace it with open hands. It
Okay.
now allows us to potentially spend lesser time to get more done. It also allows us to reach, customers specifically with the need that he has.
Yes.
Need to embrace it with open arms. So,
Absolutely.
so that would be my take on this, on the way forward for marketeers and salespeople.
Great. So you see this now is as inevitable. We have to move into that space, Anuj, and there's no going away from it. So even if COVID were to technically end, the new normal would be the digital plus the physical efforts, and omni-channel marketing is what you see there.
Absolutely. And let me
Okay,
just add,
please, please.
Shailesh, marketing is going to become even more important than in the past, right? Smaller brands, the brands that were just launched, keeping the customer in the center, because I've taken 10 brands to the customer. Why don't I take the 12th and the 13th? Right?
Correct.
That's the way launches have happened in the past. That is something that's not here to stay anymore, right? I mean, that's a thing of the past in my view, because the big brands are likely to become bigger and the
Bigger.
smaller brands are likely to disappear.
All
uh,
right.
so marketing now becomes even more important
Even more.
than it's ever been. And
Right.
the tenets of marketing are never going to change. Digital marketing can come in, omni-channel marketing can come in, but these are only means to an end, right?
Right.
The core
Right.
principles of marketing are always going to be relevant.
Right. So, Anuj, in a way, it places even greater responsibility on the marketeers that they need to step up and ensure that they are having the best of the skill sets and are committed to the brand building processes in the best possible manner. Right? Would you share that perspective in a way?
Absolutely, absolutely, Shailesh. I think you've put it brilliantly. I think it puts a lot of responsibility on the on the marketing head, or the brand managers. And I truly believe that we are entering a phase where marketing is again going to come back to vogue. I think there was a period of time when the sales management took over completely. I think we are back to a phase where marketing is going to come back into work. I'm not taking away from sales because I've done both, but I think business is about managing all of these functions together. Sales, marketing, the back end of business, all of them needs to come together in order to manage business better. And I think that's where we are headed now.
Brilliant. I mean, Anuj, this gives me so much of hope and optimism when you say that so forcefully that marketing is back at the discussion table and it's now going to take center stage, because that's what it has to be, primarily because every organization has to be a marketing driven one, primarily. Great. Anuj, it's been great talking to you over the last 40-45 minutes. And thank you so much for sharing your perspectives around the piece of marketing excellence, life cycle management, brand building processes, the new era of digital marketing. And there was so much, I believe, to learn from all your thoughts, right? We are extremely grateful that you could spare your time, and thanks once again. Before I sign off, Anuj, any closing messages that you would want to give our audience, who's essentially comprises of pharma marketeers today? Any closing messages?
So closing messages are, if you start, make sure you're working with the right kind of people. I think that's one clear message for me. Second is get experiences rather than focus on experience. The third is, don't look for shortcuts. I think marketing is an art, it's a science. Stay true to it. Don't take shortcuts, and look, long term. Don't look short term. Don't look for the quarter. Don't look for the year. Look for a long haul, which is 5 to 6 years minimum. I think that's the only way a marketeer can make a difference.
Wonderful, Anuj. Thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure to hear from one of the masters of marketing, as I call, in an industry, because I've known you for a real long time and you've had a pedigree of building powerful brands. Thanks so much for your time once again. Thanks so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with all of us. On behalf of Intellectus Consulting, thank you so much, Anuj, and for giving us your time and your perspectives. Signing off.
Thank you, Shailesh. Thank you
Have
for
a great day.